Right, I'm going to spike this 8" here on the spiking horse, and I'm going to use pasted string to do it. I'll just show you how I load up the horse. Now, I think it's quite important that the twine, you pre-soak it before you wind it onto the horse, and I'll explain something a little later when I'm spiking to do with that. I've had it soaked in this bucket of paste now for about half an hour or so, and now I'm just going to wind it on. Now when you wind it on, you wind it on in a figure of 8 pattern. You put it around the back of this one, around the front of this one, around the back of this one. I think it's very important that when you do it, you pull it tight, really tight. You want to take the stretch out of the twine as you load the horse. So it's going onto the horse under tension, basically. I've measured out the twine here. I've got 30 yards, which is about what you need to spike an 8" shell with. Most of my shells I use 1mm hemp twine, and on this 8" I'm using 1.5mm. I'm using 2 strands, so I'm putting the 2 strands on together here. Paste quite thin. Okay, that's my last. Let's put a few turns around there to keep it tensioned. Okay. Given that it takes a bit of time to get the spiking horse loaded up, it's a damn mess. And it definitely takes more time than it does to spike dry with the spiking cam I've got over there. I guess the $64,000 question is, does pasted twine give you a better break on your shell? And in my limited experience making cylinder shells, I would have to say yes, it does. If you make 2 identical shells, but one you spike with dry twine and the other you spike with pasted twine, you fire them, look at the burst, you're not going to say, wow, that's amazing, so much better with pasted twine. It isn't that different, but there is an observable difference. I think you get a slightly bigger break, and you get a little better symmetry. So in that respect, it's well worth taking the time to do it. Having said that, on most of my smaller shells I don't. 3 and 4 inches I spike them dry. But one thing for sure is on a dry spiked shell, no matter how tightly you wind it round, no matter how strong your arms are, after you've finished, if you grab a hold of it with your fingernails, you can move the circumferential spiking side to side 3 or 4 millimeters, and the verticals as well. You can move them. Whereas on a pasted shell, once it's dried, to all intents and purposes, you've glued the twine on there. You can't move it at all. It's absolutely stuck very, very tightly to the shell. Okay, this 8-inch, I put this 48 verticals on it, and I put little marks all around the top and bottom. It's a single break, and I let a couple of lengths of the twine out, and I come down here. The nice thing about spiking with this, because I haven't got my spiking cam set up with a chair, it's on quite a high table. Obviously I can relax. I'm sitting in a chair doing this. It's much more relaxing, much less tiring, and you wind yourself into the horse. You can get a good grip on everything because you're sat down. When you get tired, you can just rest it on your lap and take a rest. So in that respect, I much prefer using the horse. And the one big disadvantage with it is, I've heard people say that the twine, because it's pasted, bites into the cardboard as you make your turn at the top and bottom. I find exactly the opposite, because it's wet and slimy. Unless you really do pull it in and make a little indent in the disc, it slips back out again. And often when you're about 4 verticals down the line, you suddenly realise that one of them has come loose and not in the place it's supposed to be. So when you come to the top here, pull it nice and tight into the disc, make a little indent so it sits in there and doesn't slip out later. And then when you get up to the top here, you can stay up close to the horse like this and just do a couple of turns per time, or you can go back a bit of a distance and do it. Bear in mind that the further you are from the horse, the longer the amount of string that's let out, the more chance it's going to snap. So generally I stay about this kind of distance from it. Put it nice and tight. You want to get loads of tension on it. And I firmly believe that pasted string shrinks when it's dry. And I'll just tell you something I noticed the other day, and it's I'm not really sure exactly what's going on, but over the last couple of years, I've had occasion to take the paste layer off shells that I've already spiked and pasted. And the other day I got a shell, and what I do is I write on the outside of the casing what's in it, the canal size, how much burst I put in, kind of stars, etc. And then I paste it and I transfer those details to the outside on the paste layer. Well, the other day I forgot to write down on my paste layer what was in the shell. Ordinarily I wouldn't bother, okay, a mystery shell, but this one I suspected was the 3rd break of a 3-break 5-inch, and it would have had just a 3/4 inch fuse on it, so I didn't really want to fire it as a single shell. So I took the paste layer off, and to my amazement the twine had slackened underneath. And when I say slackened, I could get my little finger under it. It was flopping around. 2 of the strands were flopping around, really, really loose. And I spiked that shell tight. I know I did. It was really tight when I spiked it. So I suspect that what's happening is you spike it with dry twine, and then you put the paste layer on it. The paste layer wets the twine, and causes it to stretch, because the wet string does stretch, it's a fact. But when it dries out, it doesn't go back to its original length again. Whereas when you spike a shell with pasted twine, and the twine has already been pre-soaked, and you've taken the stretch out of it when you put it on the horse, it dries out, you put it on the, you paste the shell afterwards, and okay, you're re-wetting it, but it doesn't stretch again at that point. It stays at the length it was. And I've noticed over the years, on occasions, shells that seem to burst out the side, as though the one side of the casing has given way. And I wonder, maybe this is the reason why it's burst like that, because the spiking, the circumferential spiking, or the verticals on one side have become slack during the paste process and haven't tightened up again. As I say, I'm not 100% sure about all this, but this is what it seems to me at any rate. So pasted twine here, I think it's got an advantage in that it really does grip the shell casing very tightly, and it doesn't come loose again later. You see, it's just slipped through. It's quite slimy. 48 verticals on here now. You can see just here this vertical here has slipped slightly from the position it's supposed to be in at the top. There's not much I can do about it now without unwinding the whole thing. Here as well, the space here, this vertical slipped to the left, this one slipped to the right, and they've kind of come together at the top, but it's no big deal. Okay, I've got my 48 on there, and I want to wind it down to the bottom. And at this point, you want to make sure you dig it in really deeply into the cardboard here, so that when you take it down, it doesn't slip off later. So just pull it. If you've got some good strong string, it shouldn't snap. And here the spiking horse really comes into its own. You can just rest it on your knee like this. You can pull on it. It's far more conducive to manipulating a big shell like this when you're sitting down. Okay, a really nice tight turn around the base here, about a 1/4 inch up from the disc, just to pinion all these verticals here. Now this shell I've got 7 2-inch insert shells in. They come up to about the halfway mark on the casing, and they're timed to go off 1.5 seconds after the main spillet goes off. This spillet here is 7/8. It's got 7/8 powder core in it, and the top half of the shell is filled with 1/4 and 1/2 inch green cut stars. It's 50% green and 50% silver. So this first 50% of the casing here, I want to wind the twine quite a wide band as we go up here, about 1.5 inches, I guess, 1.5 inches spacing, up to the point where the top of the fuses are on the insert shells. Okay, that's the halfway mark. And I'll just take the circumferential spiking here around, rather than doing it at an angle. I just take it round once for a straight turn. So that I've come up against the last of the wide spaces here. I've got like a double strand there, which is actually four strands thick. And continue round. So now you can see I've got wide spacing here where the insert shells are, and then I put this double band here, and then above here is cut stars, small cut stars. So now I'm going to narrow the circumferential spiking down to make squares of about 3/8 of an inch, as you would on an ordinary colour break. If you've got enough paste on the twine when you're doing this, as you're pulling it onto the shell, you should see the paste actually squeezing out of the twine. Twisting the twine here somewhere. If I were doing this on the spiking cam, my arms would have been dropping off by now. And I'd have had to stop several times to let everything uncramp. It's hard enough as it is doing it like this, but okay, I'm almost at the top now. It'll be a string lined side by side. If it's got a twist in it, just straighten out a section. Okay, and there. Half inch around the top. I find this, putting the half inch a little easier to do on the spiking cam than on here actually. It's somewhat awkward on the horse. Position this last turn just up against the end of the disc. got my ball. Don't rely on this half hitch to hold it. It often doesn't, it slips. But anyway, I'll get the awl and I'll just poke it under one of the verticals. But that's done. Nice wide circumferential spiking here where the inserts are, and then close up the top where the cut stars are, and 48 verticals.